and welcome to In the Garden with Flower Hill Farm. I'm your host, Nicole Pitt. On today's episode, we are talking about flowers, their history, and some of my favorite annual varieties. As we approach winter, I always have a bit of sadness that we are saying goodbye to the beauty of the season. But now is the time that I get really excited about next season. And for many of us, that means the planning starts now. We are scouring those seed catalogs. In fact, over at my farm, I already have multiple varieties planted that will be blooming in the spring. We'll get to some of those in just a minute, but first, let's dive into a brief history of flowers. The very first flowering plant originated around 140 million years ago, give or take a few million. How do we know this? Well, the flowers were discovered in fossils. I used to love finding fossils when I was a kid. So much fun. Not only do flowers provide beauty, but they also bring significant meaning, playing a role in cultures and traditions around the globe. Flowers stir emotions and express feelings often better than words can. The Egyptians were among the first to use flowers in daily life and rituals. The lotus flower blooms in the muddy waters of the Nile, symbolizing creation and rebirth. And of course, so many flowers are linked to Greek mythology. They created elegant garlands and offered them as gifts to the gods. I wanted to mention a couple of those myths I thought you might enjoy. The rose is connected to Eros, the god of love. Rose is his name, spelled backwards. And now the rose is a universal symbol of love and beauty. The hyacinth flower grew from the blood of Hyacinthus, a Spartan prince killed accidentally by Apollo. I'd like to hear more about that story. And the daffodil, one of my favorites. The Greek myth says that the flower is named for Narcissus, a beautiful youth who died after falling in love with his own reflection in a body of water. Those are just a few myths. There are dozens more. Here's another fun fact. Would you believe that in the 1600s in the Netherlands, certain tulip bulbs were so valuable they were worth more than gold? Some bulbs were selling for thousands of dollars, and that's thousands of dollars in the 1600s. And if you're a fan of those period shows like Bridgerton, you see amazing floral arrangements in every room. And in the Victorian era, flowers were a way to convey messages, with each flower or flower color signifying something unique and sometimes hidden messages. Of course, we can't talk about flowers without talking about their medicinal value. Flowers like calendula, chamomile, and echinacea are just a few that herbalists and medical professionals have been using for centuries to treat ailments. Okay, let's talk about some of my favorite annuals and just a couple. Today we're talking about hardy annuals, meaning these flowers prefer to grow in cooler temperatures since we are entering the cold season. Here's one I just planted about 500 of at my farm. It's known as Love in a Mist, or Nigella. Now, this plant dates back about 2,500 years, originating in the Middle East. The flower got its nickname because the blooms seem to float in a sea of greenery. If you're not familiar with the greenery, it's very much like fennel or dill, very airy. It's one of my favorite fillers to use for bouquets on the farm. My favorite variety is Delft Blue. It's so dreamy, and when it dries, these fun pods form. Technically, they're seed pods, but they can be used for dried arrangements or for decoration. Here's a variety I'm so excited to try. Sparky Apricot Poppies. I just love the delicate look of a poppy. It's hard not to smile when you see them. The Sparky Poppy is a double apricot color. It's a flower pollinators flock to. Poppies have such a deep-seated history spanning the globe. The earliest evidence of poppy seeds being used for food dates back 5,000 years. When many think of poppies, the red poppy comes to mind. They were adopted to symbolize the soldiers who were killed in the First World War. And new this year to the Botanical Interests lineup, the Mammoth Navy Blue Sweet Pea. It's a vibrant purple blue, not often seen in nature. These blooms are extra large for a sweet pea, and they are more heat and drought resistant than your typical sweet pea. Now, these are not edible peas. They are in fact toxic, but the pollinators devour them, and they are amazing in cut flower arrangements. These are just a few of the varieties I'm excited to try in 2026. Coming up on In the Garden, we will chat with another flower lover. We will be joined by Kara Jamison of the Blooming Joy Flower Company, based in Tennessee. We will talk more favorite varieties and seed saving. Stay tuned. Welcome back to In the Garden with Flower Hill Farm, and I'm so excited about the guest we have for you today. Her name is Kara, and she is coming to us from Tennessee. And Kara has been growing flowers for quite a few years now, and she is the founder, owner of Blooming Joy Flower Company. Kara, I'm so excited to see you. How are you?
Hi, I'm so excited to talk to you, Nicole. We get to chat all about flowers for the next little bit.
I feel like we have been sending messages back and forth for quite a few years now, but this is the first time that we've actually gotten to chat. Oh my gosh. Okay. So for those of our listeners that are not familiar with what you do, tell us a little bit about the Blooming Joy Flower Company and how it got started.
Yeah, so I started growing cut flowers in 2018. Years before that, my husband and I had vegetable gardens, and he would grow the vegetables, and I would turn all of the food into baby food for my oldest child. But it wasn't until I unfortunately lost my mom in 2015 that I had the seed planted in my heart to learn how to grow cut flowers to bring others joy. And the word joy is really important in my story because my mom's name was Joy. And so in early 2018, I was like, okay, how am I going to learn how to grow all of these cut flowers? I've got 4 kids, do a million things, but I had this passion in my heart. So I dove into everything I could learn and started sharing my journey on social media. And here I am 7 years later, still sharing the joy of how to grow cut flowers.
So tell us about your climate in Tennessee. It's much different from me. I'm way up in New York State. I've already had a few frosts this year. Tell us about your climate and when your average first and last frosts are.
So I live about 45 minutes southeast of Nashville, Tennessee, which is a zone 7. And my first frost date is around October 15th. And my last frost date is around April 15th. And so I think that we have a very mild winter. If we have snow in the forecast, we do a happy dance and pray for snow because we don't get a whole lot of it down here. So I am truly able to grow plants 12 months out of the year. And I do. I start seeds all year long.
Oh, wow. That is actually, we had more than 20 feet of snow this past winter. So it's so different. And I'm very jealous that you're able to grow year round. And I kind of do the same thing in my basement, but really I'm just starting seedlings for when I can finally plant them out. But speaking of starting seeds, I know you do a lot of that. So tell us about the space where you start those seeds and the methods that you like to use.
So I have a few different places that I start seeds. When I first started my cut flower growing journey, I needed to grow a lot of seeds in a small space. So I happened to find the art of soil blocking. And soil blocking is really great because you can truly grow a lot of seeds in a smaller amount of space. So I took a small closet that I had and put a little table in there with a 4-foot grow light. And I was able to grow over 800 seedlings under that one 4-foot grow light, my first year that I ever grew cut flowers. And I just became hooked after that. And so my space now, which I use a lot of in November, December, January, and February, is indoors in a little closet. I've got a metal rack, and I've got all of the shop lights, and I do a lot of my soil blocking inside of that. But I also do have a greenhouse now that my husband built last year. And so I have been experimenting, trying to start seeds in there during the winter time. And so that's been a fun and interesting learning process, doing it in the greenhouse.
I feel like gardeners are like MacGyver when it comes to figuring out how to find places where we can start as many seeds as possible, because it's true. You don't need fancy equipment. You just need a light and soil and some water every once in a while. And you pretty much can start seeds anywhere. So soil blocking versus plug trays. Have you found a difference between the seedlings that you grow in the soil blocks versus anything that you start in a larger tray?
Well, I can grow a whole lot more plants in a smaller space versus a plug tray. And what I'm doing is I am trying to time from the moment that I plant the seed to about 4 weeks later when the transplant is big enough to start hardening off, that at that point, it's okay for me to be planting in the garden. So it's all about timing, and I just like it because it's really space saving. And you save a lot of soil too, because really, when people come to me and I show them, soil blocks, they're like, you really can grow a plant in that tiny little block. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of amazing.
For sure. For those of the listeners who aren't familiar with a soil block, it's basically maybe about the size of a Pop-Tart, and it has little 3/4 inch blocks, and there are 20 of them in that small space. And you literally can grow. I think I have kitchen trays that I use, and I can fit 200 and something, 240 seedlings on one cafeteria tray. It's incredible the amount that you can grow. Yes.
Exactly. And I used to, in the early days, I used to use styrofoam trays. And so, like, for example, I just went to Costco and I bought some corn on a tray. I would save that styrofoam tray, and I think I could fit probably 100 little blocks just in that one little tray. So I feel like us gardeners, we're always figuring out, like, what kind of stuff do we have laying around that we can use to grow plants in?
A lot of the times I would use the takeout trays. Like if you ordered lo mein or something from the China restaurant, you just literally use that, and you could fit 40 in just those little tiny black trays. Oh my gosh. So it's the time of year right now where a lot of us are thinking about saving the seeds that we have that are growing in the garden. Now, do you do a lot of seed saving yourself?
I do. I love to save seeds because not only does it, help me save money in the garden, but also there's just something about having a plant that you've grown in your garden, go to seed. Those little seeds just kind of start to know your environment. And so it may produce an even better plant for you next year. And so I save a ton of seeds. Some seeds that I save are poppies. Those are so fun. And the pods are really fun for dried flowers too. And I also save Nigella, which is one of my favorite cut flowers that you can use for fresh or dried flowers, the pods.
They're beautiful.
Yeah. And in the summer garden right now, celosia is just a workhorse when it comes to seed saving. I feel like it's one of the best beginner flowers to even try to save seeds of because it just like gives you seeds really quickly.
So productive. There are hundreds of them. I mean, I would even say thousands depending on the type of celosia. Yes.
Yeah. So I dry a lot of flowers, and celosia makes a fantastic dried flower. And I wish I knew how many thousands of seeds I have that have dropped on the floor from drying that celosia. There are so many.
So what are your favorite methods to seed saving? Is it as simple as shaking it and putting it in a little paper bag, or what do you have to do to save those seeds to make sure they're viable when you want to start them?
So we'll continue on with the celosia. What I like to do is I like to let it start to go to seed on the plant. And you can really see this process happen kind of at the base of the celosia flower. And you'll see the tiny little black seeds start to appear. So I will cut that stem off and I will put it in just a little plastic box. I get a 10 pack of them from, a big box store. And I just let that celosia head dry in the box. And once it's dry, if you shake it, you will just see so many seeds inside of that box. So that's one way I like to save seeds.
And similar with the poppies as well, right? You just would dry the pods out.
Yeah, so I let the pods dry on the plant. I let them turn really brown outside on the plant. And then I'll cut that pod off and just stick it in the plastic box and let it dry a few days, or it could be a few months. And, I will just crack that pod open, let all the seeds spill out in the box, and you have a plethora of seeds.
It's incredible also the germination rate on the seeds that I save myself. For instance, the poppies. I couldn't believe it. I sprinkled some poppies over just a small little layer of soil and I had hundreds of little poppy plants. I was overwhelmed because then you have to separate them all and it can get crazy. Yes.
It's so true. Straw flower is another favorite of mine to save because not only does it make a great fresh cut flower, but it makes a fantastic dried flower. And straw flower is one of those flowers I have found that the germination rates go down the older the seed is. And so I really like to save my straw flower seeds each year so I can replant in January and February.
Yeah.
you get really good germination rates because that
Yeah.
seed is really fresh.
It's so fresh. So,
Hmm.
because you have such a mild climate, you could overwinter a lot of plants. And if basically, we like to call this cool flowers because they prefer to bloom when it's cooler. So, you can't wait until April or May to get them in the ground. You like to get them in the ground earlier. Now, because you have such a mild climate, you can overwinter so many things. Talk to us about what you like to overwinter and what you found to be most successful.
I put these flowers in a couple different categories. The ones that I direct sow and I feel like don't need any attention at all during the winter. They can handle whatever winter weather comes at them, whether it be snow, a little bit of ice. And these are things like larkspur is just a fantastic cold hardy plant. And I direct sow that one in October and November. Nigella is another one in this category. Bachelor buttons, that one is such a workhorse. And Beplurum is just the cutest little yellow flower that's a great filler flower that is just tough as nails during our winter. I don't cover any of those plants with frost cloth at all during the winter. Yarrow is also in that as well. Love yarrow. But there are some other plants that do need the cold period to grow well and bloom well, but need a little extra protection with frost cloth. And so one of these is strawflower. It is cold hardy to a point. It doesn't love below freezing temperatures. So I make sure when I plant that one, I am closer to the spring side. Like I actually plant mine late February, early March, but I have frost cloth on hand to make sure I'm covering those plants if we dip below freezing during that time period. And so, yeah, those are just some of the flowers that I plant in the fall and the winter.
Do you use any mulch at all or just strictly frost cloth?
Oh, absolutely. I believe, building your soil is very important during, I actually add a lot of compost to my beds in the fall because I am planting these cut flowers into the compost in the fall to grow slowly all winter and bloom in the spring. And so let's take Sweet William, for example. Sweet William is a flower that I love to start by seed in October. I grow it out until about mid-November, and then I plant it outside then. And so I have these transplants and I'm planting in fresh compost. And I make sure that I have a bed of mulch around these transplants because it's like a blanket for us. It just keeps the ground a little warmer. It protects the soil from, winter conditions. And so I use a couple different things. I have a whole livestock farm. And so I have lots of either hay or straw on my farm that the farm animals use. And at some point, they're done with it. And so these two products get really well aged. And so I will just go out in the field and I'll take the straw or the hay and I will use that to dress around my transplants. And so that acts as like a blanket for them because inevitably, we do drop below freezing here and you at random get a couple bouts of snow or ice just at random. And so I will definitely make sure my beds are nicely covered and warm going into the winter using mulch.
Yeah, we are just now prepping my hoop house to plant all of my cool flowers, but in zone 4, it's much different than zone 7. I do have to plant in a high tunnel. It's not heated, but
Right.
it provides that extra layer of protection. And then also I have to cover sometimes a triple layer of frost cloth in order for me to be successful with things like overwintering ranunculus. I have found that larkspur does fantastic in my climate, and so does buplurum, but I'm not even trying. Sometimes they'll self-sow themselves from the previous year, and all of a sudden I'll be like, there is larkspur everywhere. But it's really fun to see. I like to experiment a lot. So plants that aren't really typically grown over winter in my zone, I'll try it anyway, because that's how we discover that things actually work when some people are telling us that they don't.
Yeah, that's what taught me a lot about these flowers is letting some of them go to seed and self-sowing and seeing, they bloomed beautifully in the spring and I let them go to seed and then I saw them pop back up in the fall and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So they're popping back up at this time of year and then I wouldn't cover them at all during the winter. And I saw how they just coasted through the winter and I was like, wow, okay. Well, this makes my job a little easier. I'm not going to spend money on a frost cloth covering this particular plant because it just survives super well. And so, I really plan my fall and winter growing garden life around that, really diving into the things that are so cold hardy and don't need my attention, like
Yeah.
the Biplorum, Larkspur, and Nigella.
So turning now to our summer annuals that don't like those cold temperatures. Now, I saw you using that Botanical Interests zinnia seed shaker, and I saw you had great success with that. Tell us about using that and what you found was really a benefit to that.
I had fantastic success. So the zinnia seed shaker from Botanical Interest covers approximately 500 square foot of growing space. It is so much. And when I first opened the seed can, I was just amazed. It was 100% zinnia seeds. Like there's no filler in there. And I couldn't believe how many seeds were in this can. And so I happened to expand my garden area this year and I added a new pretty fence. And I just had dreams of having just this gorgeous row of zinnia flowers go along that fence. And so that's what I did. I ended up just tilling up the ground and I sprinkled the zinnia seeds in about Mother's Day. And so that was after my last danger of frost. Our ground was pretty warm at that point. The self-sown zinnias from last year had already popped up, so I knew that we were doing good. And I just sprinkled those zinnia seeds right on top of the soil. And I did also add in a few other things like cosmos and marigolds of my own. And just, rake the soil over just a little bit because zinnias do like darkness to germinate, and just kept it watered. And it turned out absolutely gorgeous. Not only were there a plethora of zinnias I could use for cut flowers, but just watching all the pollinators that came to that patch was so fun and just so relaxing.
Oh, I love it. And making the landscape better and still having it be a patch for cut flowers. It's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And so now that we're really late in the season and my first frost day is quickly approaching, I have just left those zinnias and now the birds have found it.
Ooh.
And it's really fun watching the birds come and get the seeds from the zinnia heads. And I'm like, oh, I'm feeding nature. I'm so
You
happy.
created a little wildlife habitat. Not even trying.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm so glad you're getting some food.
Awesome. So zinnias, warm season annual. What other warm season? I mean, celosia is a warm season. We know you love that. What are some other warm season annuals that you start from seed?
Oh, sunflowers
Yep.
is always a fantastic one. And I really love marigolds as well. And I like marigolds they make really pretty dried flowers. And of course, there's lots of benefits in the vegetable garden too for marigolds. But I really like to use the heads for dried flowers to make marigold garland, or I put the dried flower marigold on a pumpkin this time of year. And yeah, a dried flower pumpkin where I just take a pumpkin, I put some Spanish moss, and then I just hot glue a bunch of dried flowers on top of the pumpkin. And marigolds is just the epitome of fall.
I know they really are. And some people don't like the way they smell. I happen to be a person who loves the way that they smell. I will walk into my greenhouses in the spring and I have one house that's literally half marigolds and I just breathe it all in. It's absolutely delicious and just is a sign really of late summer and fall. It's beautiful.
See, I fall into the category of I really don't like their foliage smell. And in fact, I grew them the first year I ever grew cut flowers. And I was like, I'm not growing these again because I don't like the way they smell. But I discovered how beautiful they look for dried flowers. And so that's why I grow a lot of them now.
So does their odor lessen as they dry?
So the odor mainly comes from the foliage. So when I am drying, I don't really smell it too much on the dried flower.
There. So
when I dry them for dried flowers, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
What'd you say?
I was going to say that if people don't like the way that marigolds smell, that if you dry it, then you don't have to smell the odor that you're so disheartened to.
Yes. And when I dry marigolds, or really any flower for that fact, I am stripping most of the foliage off. And so I'm not even drying it with the foliage.
Perfect. Okay, so sunflowers, marigolds, zinnias, celosia. What are some fillers that you like?
Well, I personally love a lot of perennials for fillers. I love to grow a couple different types of mountain mint
Me too.
for fillers.
Hmm.
It's just a workhorse perennial, and it does spread. I find that it doesn't spread quite as prolifically as like regular old mint does, but it does spread. And I love to use nine bark, which is another perennial, and then sedum as well, which is a flower, but I will take the stems before it has bloomed and cut them down. I'll use that as filler in
Oh,
my
they're beautiful.
arrangements as
Yes.
well. Yes.
So you, I have noticed, have entered your blooms into contests like the local fair and stuff like that. Tell us about your experience with that.
I have a funny story about this. So I've entered my flowers into two different contests. And the first year that I ever entered my flowers was the first year I ever grew cut flowers. And I'm
Wow.
not sure that I ever even saw a contest. I just knew that I had these really pretty flowers and I was going to enter them. So what I did was I cut my stem off and I didn't know exactly what to put it in because a lot of the times you have to bring them in a container. And so I was like, well, this is for a flower show. So they probably only want to see the flower head. So I just put my stem in a little jelly jar and I cut my flower stem really short so you could only see the flower. And I entered it that way. Well, after the show, I didn't win anything. And when I got feedback, it says, you really need to have more stem on your flower when you enter it into a show. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I had no idea,
No, you
that
they were looking just at the top and not the
I
whole
was
thing.
just
Yeah.
focused on the flower bloom and not the stem at all.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, flower stem matters in a flower show. And so the second show that I ever entered my flowers in was a daffodil show because I love daffodil. I have planted over 10,000 daffodil bulbs at my farm. And so they multiply over the years. So there's no telling how many I have now. But I like to collect a bunch of specialty
Yeah,
daffodils.
they're
And so
gorgeous.
I entered them in a contest and I made sure that my stems were nice and long and the flowers were really open and the petals looked perfect. And I won a couple different first place ribbons with
Yeah,
them.
that's amazing. That's so fun. They just asked me. So my shop is directly across from the county fairgrounds. Like literally, there's 15 feet between, just the width of the road. And they just came over a couple weeks ago and asked me to be a judge for next year's competition. So I'm a
That
little
is
nervous.
fun.
So
I
at
would
least that
love
takes
that.
the pressure off of me entering, but now I've got to judge. So.
Yeah,
So
you
any
will do
advice?
fantastic.
Yes, thank you. Any advice on getting the perfect bloom? Do you use anything to deter bugs or extra fertilizer?
I mean, personally, I do not spread anything on my flowers at all, even if it's organic. We have a whole homestead here and we do raise bees for honey. And so we're just committed to not spraying anything at all. And so I really just personally prefer to let nature do its work. The good bugs come in, they shoo out the bad bugs. And I also just make sure that when I'm cutting flowers, I'm cutting them at the proper harvest stage. So a lot of the times, that's when they're pretty close. Like take a Cosmo, for example. When I'm cutting Cosmos, the bud hasn't even opened yet. The bud is still pretty tight. And I will cut that flower and it will continue to open in a vase. Versus if I just let that Cosmo bloom open in the field and then I cut it, a lot of the times the pollinators love it. The pollinators have
Yeah.
already found that flower. And so at that point, I just let the flower hang out with them and I won't use that one for cut flowers.
Yeah, people don't, it's hard to get people to understand that. And that's why I will harvest my gladiolas closed, my
Yes.
snapdragons closed, because as soon as that bud opens and a bee touches it, that bud has already done its job and it's just going to fall off. So you really have to really harvest when things are tight. There are some exceptions like a zinnia or a dahlia, but mostly flowers are harvested before they even look pretty.
Before the tight bud, bachelor buttons is one of those that I think of too. It is such a pollinator friendly flower, but when I harvest it, it's kind of like looking down at a pencil. You know how you can see the lead on a pencil? Well, when you look down at the bachelor button flower head, you can see just the tiniest little color of what that flower is going to be. A lot of the time it's blue. And so right when I see that color blue, I harvest the whole stem, put it in some water, and it will continue to open inside after you harvest it.
Great advice. I actually did not know that. I didn't know you put those early, so thank you. Now,
Yeah.
okay, so you just taught me something. Now, I see that your passion lately really has been teaching others about growing cut flowers. Tell us how you got into that and what you've been doing with your time lately.
I've been online for 7 years now, talking all about my journey with growing cut flowers. And over the years, I just discovered I love helping others learn the joy of growing a little cut flower garden. Not even a flower farm, just a little space for them out in their backyard where they can go out in the morning, take a look at the flowers, see what has bloomed, cut a few flowers, for a bouquet. And I really just dove into that. And I think this is only a natural progression because I feel in my former life, it feels like a former life now, I worked as a registered nurse. And so I like to help people and I like to teach people. And so over the past few years, I've just really dove into that. And I have found myself doing a lot of speaking presentations now to different groups and at conferences about multiple different cut flower growing topics, from how to even start a cut flower garden. What flowers should you start with? And also fun things you can do with these cut flowers, like drying them for different craft projects. And so I have really leaned into that lately because truly that's what makes me happy about growing these cut flowers and helping others, is helping them grow the cut flowers.
Oh, I love that. And people really are learning from you. I see it every day in your comment section. I mean, you've got a very large following and they love you just because, you know why, Kara? Because you are yourself and that comes across in all the stuff that you do. So I appreciate you. Yes.
Thank you.
So
Thank
if
you.
people don't know where to find you, tell our audience where they could follow you and learn more.
Yeah. Well, my website is bloomingjoyflowerco.com. And this year I started a blog because I wanted another way to help teach people. And so I have a whole cut flower growing blog where I talk about all kinds of things there. And I'm all over social media, Instagram at Blooming Joy Flower Co. I'm also on Facebook, Threads, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right. We'll put all of that information in the show notes too, so people can write that down and get to you. Okay. And my final question to you, Kara, before we leave you, I would like to know, and you kind of touched on this earlier, but what inspires you in the garden?
I really feel like when you grow plants, it just gives you hope and it helps you look forward to the next day and even the next season. When I am planting seeds, it is just the most fun thing to me to wake up every day and take a look and see if they've germinated or how much they've grown. And it doesn't even matter how many years I've been doing it. It just gives me hope and it gives me encouragement to look forward to the future and what will bloom.
Aw, it really doesn't get old. It doesn't get old, does it?
No.
Oh, well, thank you so much for spending some time with me. And I look forward to chatting with you again sometime.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. I had fun.
Okay. We'll be right back. Now it's time for my favorite segment. It's called Sow and Tell, and this is where we feature your stories. We want to hear from you. If you have a thought about the previous episode, go ahead and share those thoughts with us. You can send them in a video or audio form. Send them to me. It's Nicole at botanicalinterests.com. And today we are going to be featuring someone close to my heart. Now, if you guys watch me over on YouTube, you're familiar with my team member, Ashley. I have two Ashleys. This is Ashley number 2. Now, Ashley is a lifelong gardener herself, and I asked her to share some of her favorite parts of gardening with us.
Hi there, my name is Ash, and kind of tell you what my favorite part about growing is. I always grow a really big garden every season, full of tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and all the plants you could think of, which is great to provide my family fresh food during the growing season. But really what I'm super passionate about is harvesting herbs and other medicinal plants. I'm very passionate about making salves and tinctures and different things like that that I can share with my family and with my community through my business. It's now November. So I literally just processed most of my herbs last week and got them into jars. I have a nifty little shelf that I dry on here in my kitchen, but I have everything from lavender to marjoram and thyme and yarrow, balsam, lemon balm, citronella, oregano, mints, chamomiles, patchouli, lots of different stuff. All these little sage bundles that I made. But my favorite is always mullein. Mullein is my trusty go-to. Those are my favorite things to do with my garden. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Ashley. I am so glad that Ashley mentioned patchouli because I have a little bit of a story with patchouli. So a lot of people don't realize that the patchouli cologne that you either love or you hate is actually derived from a plant. And I didn't even realize that myself until last year. I was browsing through the plant catalogs and I saw an option for patchouli and I said, absolutely add to cart. So we grew patchouli at the nursery here and we sold hundreds of the plants because, like myself, a lot of people did not know that it comes from a plant. So as soon as they realized that they could be growing patchouli at home, they came from hours away to my shop just to buy this patchouli plant. I think we sold over 200 of them in 4-inch pots. And the patchouli is actually made from extracting the essential oils from the plant. And that is how the cologne is made. Love it or hate it, patchouli is definitely a strong smell. In fact, when you walked into the greenhouse where we kept it, all you could smell was patchouli. So it had some people running out the door, but a lot of people flocking to the plant. So patchouli, add it to your list. Thanks for hanging out with me today. You can find more of my gardening antics on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. It's at Flower Hill Farm NY. And some of the products that we talked about today can be found at botanicalinterests.com, and you can use the code in the garden for 5% off. Now, if you want to see what we're talking about, subscribe to Botanical Interests on YouTube. You can find garden tips, ideas, and behind the scenes fun. All the links are in the episode description. Let's connect next week in the garden. I'll meet you there.